Hello and welcome to episode 4 of season 4 of Conservation Conversations. Sorry, I think we're actually episode 5 of season 4 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I am your host, Christina Hagen, coming to you live from Johannesburg this time. We have over 125 episodes recorded and available on YouTube. So if you miss out because of load shedding or your Tuesday nights have gotten busy, then never fear, you can always catch up later. Tonight, I'm excited to hear all about Trevor's Western Cape Big Year, which he undertook last year. But before we get to that, please remember that you can use the Zoom chat and Q&A feed or the Facebook comment feed to communicate with us, and we'll answer some questions at the end of the webinar. We are, of course, on all major social media channels, and you can use the hashtag Conservation Conversations to let us know what you think of the show. We aim to keep these webinars free for all to learn and enjoy. So if you enjoy the series and are able to contribute, no matter how small, please visit the Cricket page or EFT BirdLife South Africa directly and use the reference webinars and your name. And we are so grateful to those of you who continue to support us during these challenging times. Have you booked your spot for A Flock to the Wilderness yet? We are very excited about this event. It promises to be full of exciting birding excursions, top speakers, and to showcase quality ornithological research, as well as being a gathering for passionate bird enthusiasts. The event is taking place at the Wilderness Hotel from the 24th to the 28th of May, 2023, and bookings are now open on the BirdLife website. We are very excited and privileged to have world-renowned photographer Richard Flack, who will be hosting a Canon photography workshop on the 28th of May. There are only 50 places available, and this promises to be an extremely interesting workshop for any photography enthusiasts. And Richard will share his insights and philosophies on how to capture incredible shots that tell a story. As I said, spots are limited, so please book yours. The BirdLife South Africa AGM will take place on Saturday with a luncheon after the meeting. Please visit the website to find out more. BirdLife South Africa and Outland Escape Tours have joined forces to organize the 2023 Hiking and Biking for Birds Adventure Series, with 6 events happening at 6 different locations throughout the year. The money raised from these events will support the Empowering People and regional conservation programs. The events will alternate between hiking and biking, and they're not aimed at being strenuous, but an enjoyable way to find special birds in each of these regions. And I'll post a link in the chat for how you can find out more. And we're also very excited to host our BirdLife South Africa photography competition in partnership with Canon South Africa. There are some absolutely phenomenal prizes up for grabs in a variety of categories. So please check out the website and get your entries good. We are also very excited that BirdLife South Africa and Eco Training have opened up the weekend of the 19th to the 22nd of May for another of our ever popular birding weekends in the magical Pafuri region of Kruger National Park. Please join us for some of the best birding in South Africa with specials like the Racketel Roller, Hell's Fishing Owl, Boehm's Spinetail, and 3-banded Porpoise. The rates are 6,000 Rand per person sharing for 3 nights, all inclusive, and you'll never find better value in this sought after destination. The weekend is limited to 20 people, so don't delay. So before we get on to Trevor's talk, as I mentioned, we have a special guest here to say a few words. Mike Buckham is the chair of the Cape Bird Club, which is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. And there are a bunch of exciting events, and the main feature is a big year in partnership with the City of Cape Town. So Mike, we've invited you on to just say a few words about this initiative and what you're aiming to achieve.
Thanks very much, Christina. Thanks for having me. And I must say, I'm very grateful to join the webinar this evening. Yeah, and I see you grabbed one of the photos that I took this morning in Cape Point. You were very sneaky there, but I think one of my favorite birds in the world is ground woodpecker, and we were at Cape Point this morning adding a few birds to our challenge list. So the City of Cape Town, Cape Bird Club Birding Challenge, Birding Big Year, is a collaboration between the City of Cape Town. My very good friend Cliff Dawes and I sat down about 6 months ago and thought about doing something at the Cape Bird Club that would really honor the bird life that we have in the city. So we launched this, and we've set about with a number of objectives, which we started off at the beginning of the year saying what we wanted to achieve. And I think already we've seen a lot of that. So firstly, we wanted to celebrate our 75th year. And, you know, bird clubs are continuing to need to show how relevant they are in a very changing world. You know, social media takes over, and how relevant is it to get people together in bird clubs. And that was one of the ways we wanted to do it, is make people more aware of what a bird club has to offer. We wanted to highlight the bird diversity in the city of Cape Town, and we've already recorded, I think Trevor will correct me, but I think we're around 280 species of birds that have already been recorded within the boundaries. And so maybe just to mention, the boundaries are maybe a bit broader than you'd think. It's from Azafontein on the west coast, across to Malmesbury, just south of Malmesbury, and then down to Gordons Bay and the Strand, and then around the coastline, Cape Point, and then back up to the west coast. So that's the city's boundaries. And, you know, we also wanted a way to introduce new birders to birding in the city. And we've been pretty much blown away by the response we've had. We've got an incredibly active WhatsApp group, and everyone warned me against having big WhatsApp groups, and you know, people are going to post things that are inappropriate, and they're going to ask stupid questions, and it's going to be a waste of my time trying to manage it. We've got a WhatsApp group with about 260 people on it, sharing sightings, sharing photos, sharing pins. One of our members, Dennis Laidler, has got a map of the city with pins dropped of all the birding sites where people are seeing amazing birds. And we're also discovering new and wonderful birding spots that people can go to. So we've got an amazing spot now in Marmray, which no one really knew about. Cliff knew about it, but we didn't. I certainly didn't. And it's called the Moravian Mission Church. And one of our participants coined it the More Avian Mission Church. So there are more avies than you'd believe at this particular spot, and it's amazing. There was a whole bunch of people out there this morning seeing amazing birds, and I know Trevor was there this morning because he finally added his Greater Honey Guide, which he's been searching for about 20 hours. So well done, Trevor. You've added the Greater Honey Guide at last, because I think that was starting to become painful. So we've encouraged all these birders, young and old, and we have 11-year-olds all the way through to people in their latter ages. I've got to be careful how I phrase that. And it's incredible to see people out in the field enjoying birding. So that's been incredible. And yesterday I sent out a note to congratulate a 14-year-old, Amina van der Spek, who reached 200 bird species. She's about the 25th person to reach 200. And she's just 14 and lives in Malmesbury and is now birding with her brother Ruiz, who's one of our very good young birders. And it's incredible to see those kinds of people out there in the field and enjoying the birding that we have to offer. Plus, we're collecting an enormous volume of data. So people are using the BirdLife app to log all their bird species. And we've had, I think at last count, at the end of February, we had about 55,000 records. BirdLife pins that people are dropping pins, and it's going to give us an incredible insight into what birds are around in the city. And we also wanted to highlight some of the city's reserves. So some of the lesser known reserves, such as the Macassar Dune Conservation Area. That's been a real hotspot as well. And throughout the year, our bird club is going to be visiting these sites. So it's easy to participate. If you're listening to this and you live in Cape Town and you don't know about it, then you've been sleeping, but we'd love you to join if you haven't already. You can email me, my mail address is on the website. We'd love more birders to participate, even upcountry birders who visit Cape Town, join the challenge and join the WhatsApp group and see what's out there. And yes, we also want to grow the membership base at the Cape Bird Club, and we've already seen 40 to 50 new members join a club that's already about 600 strong. So we're having a lot of fun. We're seeing some great birds. There's lots of healthy competition, and we look forward to the rest of the year. We can't believe it's been so successful already, and we really appreciate you having us on to give it a little bit of a punt. If you listen to John Matham's show, I always I'm on the John Maytham show the first of the month. We do a little bit of a monthly roundup. So we're getting great exposure, and I think nothing could be better for the birds of this country to do that. And finally, last word, I know I've run out of my time, but we would love the other affiliated BirdLife clubs around the country to incept something similar in years to come. I'm sure the Wits Bird Club could do something, and the bird clubs all around the country. Find out what your boundaries are. Ask Henk very nicely to create a challenge, and let's see what you can do by doing these challenges throughout the country. So Christina, I think that's pretty much all I have to say, and I really do appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike, for joining us and giving us that overview. I've certainly enjoyed the interactions. As you pointed out at the Cape Bird Club meeting the other day, I'm not quite as high in the challenge as I would like to be, but I've certainly enjoyed all the outings and the camaraderie that this event has created. So that's been wonderful. Thank you very much to you and the Cape Bird Club for initiating this. And I would encourage anyone who's visiting Cape Town to join us, even if it's for a short time. I've put the website for the Cape Bird Club in the chat box if you want to go there. Pauline has asked about the WhatsApp group. I think, Pauline, you'll need to get in touch with Mike. As he said, his email address is on the Cape Bird Club website, so you can go there and get in contact with Mike to get added to the WhatsApp group. Thanks very much, Mike. Mike has a family commitment to head off to, so we'll let you get back to that. Thanks very much for joining us. And so we'll move on to our main event. The reason we had Mike on is because it's the Cape Town Big Year, and Trevor last year did a Western Cape Big Year. And I don't think I need to introduce Trevor to any of you who are birders in South Africa or internationally. Very well known in birding circles. He is, in his own words, an obsessive birder, twitcher, and lister. But in between all his birding trips, he runs the very well subscribed Rare Bird Alert, which provides a great service to birders and twitchers across Southern Africa. And also runs the Zest for Birds pelagic trips, which have provided many people with an introduction to pelagic birding and getting lifers out at sea. So Trevor, if you can, oh, I should have changed the slide, sorry about that. Trevor, you can start sharing your slideshow, and we look forward to hearing all about your big year last year.
I cannot share until
you should have been able to.
You need to, yeah.
There we go.
Can everybody see that?
We can see that. Great.
Perfect. All right, Christina, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to BirdLife for the invite to come and chat to you. Yeah, it seems like that's all I do these days is big years, because I went straight from this Western Cape Big Year that I did last year into the Cape Town Big Year that Mike was just telling you all about. So there's no rest for the wicked, it seems. But let's just get started, and I'm sure you've all heard the term before, Big Year, and perhaps many of you have seen the movie The Big Year. So effectively, the concept is that you run around like a mad person for a full year, trying to see as many species as possible within a particular area, and you decide what that area may be. So obviously the Big Year was based on the movie, I mean, it was based on a North American Big Year, but these things happen all around the world. So Jack Winterbottom was the first person to attempt a Big Year in Southern Africa in 1964, and he scored 468 species back then, which in today's standards might seem fairly low, but if you think back 1964, that's a long, long time ago, and probably not very much was known about the exact distribution of all the species in Southern Africa. And also, it was probably a lot tougher to get around and cover Southern Africa properly back back then. In 1969, Carl Vernon and Rolf Jensen competed against one another, and Rolf won with a final total of 508 species. So already, sort of, what's that, 54 years ago, people were cracking 500 species in a year in Southern Africa. In 2011, I'm sure many of you will remember, Neil Perrins did a big year in Southern Africa, and he scored 826 species. And currently that's still the record in the sub-region. A few people have come fairly close to that, also into the 820s, but nobody has yet managed to beat that record of Neil's. 2008, a couple from the UK, Alan Davies and Ruth Miller, undertook a worldwide big year, and they called it the biggest twitch, and they ended with 4,341 species, which at the time was a new world record. So as you can see, you decide on the area that you want to use for your big year. This record, this world record, actually lasted for about 7 years. And in 2015, an American guy, Noah Stryker, also did a big year, a world big year, and he broke the record with 6,119 species, according to the IOC taxonomy. And everybody thought, oh, well, that record's going to stay for a long, long time. The following year, a Dutch guy, Arjan Dwarses, took it on, and he broke the record again, scoring 6,883 species. And that's still the current record. It's going to take a huge effort from anybody to beat that record. Arjan basically birded almost 24 hours a day. He said that he was birding probably like 18 to 19 hours a day and getting between 4 and 6 hours sleep a night, doing that for 365 days a year to get that sort of total. And obviously it all came down to planning. You have to try and sort out where you're going to, or decide where you're going to go to get the most possible species within the least amount of time. So it's not about going to odd little islands that have 1 or 2 endemic species on it. You've got to go to places where you're going to get the biggest number of species. So my big year was obviously on a much, much smaller scale than that. I decided to do the Western Cape. And one of the main reasons for this is I had done a Western Cape big year previously, in fact, in 2002. So this was going to be the 20-year anniversary of that big year. And I thought, well, I would try it again. The Western Cape is obviously that little bit highlighted in red down in the bottom end of South Africa, for those of you that are not from this part of the world. And to give you an idea, obviously, Cape Town, right down in the southwestern corner there, it stretches eastwards all the way to Nature's Valley on the Garden Route, and then northeastwards into the Great Karoo, where you get places like Beaufort West, and even further northeast, Murraysburg, and then up the west coast as well, north of Vredendal and Van Reinsdorp, into what they call the Knarsvlakte. So it's still a fairly large area to cover. It's just under 130,000 square kilometers. It's the 4th largest province in South Africa. The highest point is just over 2,300 meters, Seerewigspoort Peak. And the estimated population is just over 7 million people in the province, the 3rd highest in the country. The map on the left sort of gives an idea of population density. So you can see the densest population is obviously around the Greater Cape Town area. And one of the nice things is that there are large swathes of areas that are actually very, very thinly populated, which means it's lots of natural areas in the province. In terms of birds, a total of 619 species recorded in the province. We've got 13 out of the 18 South African endemics occurring in the province, and 13 out of the 17 endemic African bird families that occur in Southern Africa also occur in the province. The highest individual provincial life list, so that's the number of species seen within the province, is 553 species. The current record for a provincial big year was 412, and the current record for a provincial big day, birding big day, is 243 species. So what makes the Western Cape so interesting? Obviously, it's the varied habitats. This is just a stock standard image. So obviously we don't have polar ice in the Western Cape or tundra, but it's just to get the concept across. But we do have obviously coastline. We've got both sandy coastlines and rocky coastlines. We've got lots of sea all around the coast. We've got wetlands. These are both tidal wetlands and permanent non-tidal wetlands that we can bird at. And then we have large arid areas, the Karoo type areas, and they're also quite varied. So for instance, this would be the Little Karoo and the Tankwa Karoo, so, which is a lot sparser in vegetation. We have lots of alien plantations that always provide reasonable birding. Obviously, there's natural forest as well. And then fynbos, which is one of the big things that the Western Cape is known for. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's 6 floral kingdoms in the world. And we have the Cape Floral Kingdom here in the Western Cape. It's by far the smallest of the 6, yet it hosts over 9,000 species of plant, of which around 6,200 are found nowhere else in the world. It has the highest known concentration of plant species in the world, and its nearest rival is the Neotropical Floral Kingdom, which is South America, which only has about 1/3 of the number of species. So in terms of plants, we're certainly way ahead of anywhere else in the world. This map just gives an indication of, well, the green area is the area that the Cape Floral Kingdom covers. So you can see it does stretch up. There's a little finger that goes into the Northern Cape. And then there's also, it also stretches across into the Eastern Cape towards Port Elizabeth. But the majority of the Cape Floral Kingdom is in the Western Cape. So looking at how I plan my big years, I'm a bit of a stickler for these things. So even before I get started, I will build up a list of all the potential species that I think are possible to see, and I'll divide them up into 5 levels. Level 1 are birds that are easy and gettable anywhere. For instance, laughing doves, sparrows, etc. You don't need to go to any special place to see these birds. Level 2 birds are also easy, but one has to visit specific sites for them, like, and this is all in terms of Western Cape, for example, Cape rock jumpers. Level 3, I would consider medium difficulty birds. We've got to put in quite a bit of effort to get it, something like a Cape eagle owl. Level 4 are birds where I think they're extremely tough to get. There's no guarantee, although they are resident in the province. And an example would be Vero's eagle owl. And then level 5 are the likely vagrants. And these are both regional and national vagrants. So on a regional level, something like an African jacana, and on a national level, something like a pectoral sandpiper. So I create that target list. I divide it up into the 5 levels. And I would say that I'd take level 1, 2, and 3, and those I would be disappointed if I didn't get all of those, because I'd put in a fair amount of effort. And then I would expect to get a small number of level 4 and 5s, and that would give me my initial target of what I'm aiming for when I start with my big year. So where do I start on the first day of the big year? The first thing that I do is I look at what vagrants are around. Vagrants, as you know, it's rarities, birds that are here that are not supposed to be here. And those would be the most important things to go and get, because you never know if you're going to have another chance later in the year. So we were lucky when I started that there were a couple of these things around. There was this immature saddle bull stork out at Heidelberg, which was the first record for the province, in fact. So that was one of the early birds to get onto the list. The well-known red-necked phalaropes up at Veltref. They've been there a very long time, and people get sort of confident that they're just going to stay forever, but at some point they're going to disappear, and then you don't know when you're going to get them again. So I made sure that they got onto the list quickly. And at the time, there was also a pectoral sandpiper hanging out at Strandfontein Sewage Works. So that was another one I went to go get as soon as I possibly could, just to make sure that those were on the list. The next step that I target or that I look at are the migrants. And the idea is that in the first 3 months of the year, January through to March, I want to make sure that I can get all the migrants sorted out so that I don't have to waste precious time at the end of the year from October through to December, still trying to find some of these migrants. And that's the time when I want to be out looking for other really, really tough targets and hopefully some rarities that might be around. So in terms of the migrants, they're obviously the aerial feeders. You've got barn swallow here on the top left, white-throated swallow, top right, pearl-breasted swallow and banded martin. You'd look at the waders, bar-tailed godwit, Terrick sandpiper, marsh sandpiper, and sandling. And there's all sorts of migrants. So you've got some raptors, common buzzard and yellow-billed kite, willow warbler, common reed warbler. None of these are particularly difficult birds, but it's just useful to get them onto the list, get them out of the way, as it were, so that you can move on and concentrate on other things. So the final step would be looking at the resident birds, because those you can get throughout the year at any time of the year. In the Cape Floral Kingdom, we've got 7 fynbos endemic birds. So those are always important ones to make sure you get. Starting at the top, we have Cape Sugarbird, which is one of the actually endemic bird families in Southern Africa. We have Cape Rockjumper, also an endemic bird family in Southern Africa. Victorins warbler, which can be a tough bird to get decent views of at times. Orange-breasted sunbird, Cape Siskin, Protea canary, and perhaps the toughest of the fynbos endemics, the fynbos button quail. So these are birds you don't want to obviously miss in your big year, but I was fortunate to get all of them. And then there's a few other species that are only possible in the Western Cape. One is the Agulhas long-billed lark, so that's down in the Overberg region. And then the rest are a little plastic, I'm afraid. It's the only place in Southern Africa where you can get common chaffinch, is around the Cape Peninsula. And then you've got to go to Robben Island to go and get the chukar partridge and the peafowl. In theory, the only places you can get those in Southern Africa. We also have a number of South African endemics in the Western Cape, so you don't want to miss those. The southern black coron, Knysna woodpecker, the Cape long-billed lark, and Cape clapper lark, Cape bulbul, and Knysna warbler, which is another bird that can be tough to get reasonable views of. So looking at the residents or local birds around Cape Town, I did a number of day trips. Obviously, I spent quite a bit of time along the coast, mopping up many of our regular species here, various cormorants, gulls, terns, etc. So just to run through what we have here, top left is a Cape cormorant, then Hartlope's gull, and then a bank cormorant. In the middle row from left is sandwich tern, then crowned cormorant and African oystercatcher. and the bottom row is white-fronted plover, swift tern, and white-breasted cormorant. So these are all fairly easy birds to see along most stretches of coastline around Cape Town. Then I would also spend quite a bit of time birding along the Peninsula mountain chain, visiting places like Kirstenbosch, Newlands Forest, Cecilia Forest, and Tokai. And there's a whole suite of birds that one would want to target in those areas. Things like Swee Waxbill, southern double-collared sunbird, forest canaries, Caruprinia, lemon dove, Cape Batis, classes cuckoo, olive thrush, and bar-throat of the Palus. Most of these are not particularly restricted to those areas. From a Cape Town point of view, probably lemon dove is maybe the toughest of the lot to get, because you can only really get that at Kirstenbosch and Newlands Forest, but the rest are pretty widespread. Naturally, we've got some lovely wetlands around, places like Rondevlei, Rietvlei, Strandfontein Sewage Works, Intaka Island, etc. And they've got a whole host of species, so I visited many of those throughout the year. And these are just some of the more common species. From the top left, bluebill teal, African spoonbill, and Macoa duck. Then we have pied kingfisher, African fish eagle, and malachite kingfisher. And the bottom, great white pelican, greater flamingo, and African marsh harrier. The Hottentots Holland area is it's a bit of a broad area, but it would include places like Royale, Springle Bay, Betty's Bay, towards Kleinmond, I suppose. That whole area has a whole host of species, and besides the fynbos endemics that I already mentioned, there's a number of other species that one could target in the area. Mike Buckham's favorite bird there in the top left, ground woodpecker, Cape grassbird, obviously the African penguins down at Stony Point in Betty's Bay. You've got Cape rock thrush, then Vero's eagle and sentinel rock thrush, all around Royals, and then Nedeke, Cape bunting, and familiar chat. All birds that you're likely to get along with the fynbos endemics in that part of the world. The Overberg region also has some interesting areas. A lot of it is farmlands, but there are areas of renosterveld as well. But even the farmlands hold some very interesting birds, and definitely worth a visit on a big year. It's got one of the highest concentrations of, or probably the highest concentration of blue crane anywhere in its global range. We've also got the only breeding colony of Cape vultures in the Western Cape, down in the Overberg. That's at Potberg in De Hoop Nature Reserve. It's probably the best place to look for Denham's bustard in the province. And then a number of other species like capped wheatear, common quail, white storks, lanner falcons, stone chats, and African pipits. One of my favorite areas on a day trip from Cape Town is the West Coast, and not just the West Coast National Park, which this photo is of, but also Veldrif and the whole, basically the whole stretch of West Coast. It has a number of special places. It's not just about the waders on the West Coast. Obviously, they are always a big part of everybody's visit, but there is so much more to the West Coast. Some fantastic birds to be had there, like the black harrier, easily one of the best looking raptors in the world. Bokmakeri, the chestnut-banded plover, where the salt pans around Veldrif must be one of the strongholds for the species anywhere in Southern Africa. Cape spurfowl, Karoo scrub robins, long-billed crombecs. We have loads of European bee-eaters on the West Coast in summer, and then further LBJs like large-billed larks and greyback cisticulars. But moving away from Cape Town itself, one has to do a bit of traveling to the other extremities of the province, and one of those areas is the garden route. So the garden route probably stretches from Mossel Bay through to Nature's Valley. It's known for its forests, just incredible forests, which we don't really have anywhere else in the Western Cape. So that's naturally a very important area to go and visit. And it also has some other interesting areas, more scrubby areas, which hold a few interesting species, which we don't get closer to Cape Town. So I know everybody loves a good cisticola, but we've got a few species of cisticola that occur on the garden route that we don't get anywhere near Cape Town. This is one of them, the whaling cisticola, and another one, the lazy cisticola. There's also wing snapping cisticola on the garden route, and other species that we don't get anywhere near Cape Town. So those are definitely birds one has to go and target out east of Cape Town. I'm sure people from the east of the country will laugh about this, but black-collared barbet is a fairly recent inhabitant to the Western Cape and only on the garden route. Still not in huge numbers yet, but you do find them all the way from George Wilderness area eastwards, with a couple of records starting to come through from even further west than that now. Along the rivers on the garden route, the half-collared kingfisher is a resident, so that's an important bird to go and get there. And then one moves into the forest, and there's a whole suite of species in the forests that are only available in that small area. Things like the greenback cameroptera and grey sunbird, yellow-throated woodland warbler, black-bellied starling, green woodhoopoe. I suppose this is also a bit odd for people further east in the country to understand, because in other parts of the country, this is a bird of open woodland and things like that. It's not necessarily restricted to forest, but in the Western Cape, it's very definitely a forest bird and forest edge bird. We don't find them in any other habitats. Olive bushshrike is another forest bird. Black-headed oriole, a couple of robins like the chorister robin chat and the white-starred robin. African emerald cuckoo, another summer migrant that comes into the garden route. The Neisner turaka and the Rena trogon, always popular birds to see. These are important birds to get on the garden route. One doesn't get them all on one trip there, so several trips are required, because you've got to cover a lot of area and spend a lot of time birding to get the full suite of birds that are available there. And the other important area that one needs to visit is the interior, or the more arid areas of the province. And that's a fairly broad area. So it includes the Little Karoo, the Great Karoo, the Tankwa Karoo, and the Knarsvlakte, which heads all the way up north up the west coast. As you can see there, it's very low vegetation, some mountainous areas, a lot of gravel roads to drive, and a few rocky outcrops that you need to work as well. But it has a huge suite of birds that one can't get anywhere else. And they include things like Karoo Koran, Ludwig's bustard, spike-heeled lark, and Karoo long-billed lark, black-eared sparrowlark. This is a particularly tough bird to get, but as they are quite nomadic. And it took a long time before I eventually got this bird. I think it was probably on my 5th or 6th visit to the Karoo last year when I eventually got this bird. Desert cisticola is another one that we get in the dry areas. Namakwa warbler, and rufous-eared warbler, cinnamon-breasted warbler, This is the bird from the well-known Tankwa Karoo area, the Katbakkies area, but they are available elsewhere in the Western Cape as well. Karoo aeromomila. This is a bird of the open plains in very low bushes. And Karoo chat, lark-like bunting, and black-headed canary. And not everything is drab and brown in the Karoo. There are a few birds with a little bit of color on them. Things like the red-headed finch, which gets in the sort of northeastern portions of the province, around Beaufort West, Prince Albert area. Scaly feathered finch. And we have just a handful of species that people are often surprised about that we get in the Western Cape, and they just creep in right in the northeastern corner of the province. One of these is the South African cliff swallow. We know just a couple of culverts that they roost and nest under in the entire province, and it's almost about as far northeast as you can go from Cape Town. It's literally a few hundred meters before the border that you can get these birds. Another one is pink-billed lark, and perhaps even more special, Sclater's lark. These birds are around Beaufort West, on some private farms and reserves there, and they take a little bit of effort to get, but they are certainly around. This bird, in fact, last year I was there with my friend Michael Mason. We were laying flat on our stomach near a little well-known spot where these birds come to drink on a private farm. And these guys just came so close that at times it was very difficult to actually focus on them because they were so close. Another one of those species that's often a surprise, yellow-throated Petronia. I know it's a common bird further east, as is golden-breasted bunting. Another tough one to get in the province, but they do just sneak in right in the northeastern end. And perhaps one of the biggest surprises is that we get both species of rock jumper in the province. This is a Drakensberg rock jumper, which I photographed last year, up in the mountains near Murraysburg. They made us work for them. Michael was with me on that trip as well, and we spent many hours before we eventually found them. But when we did find them, they certainly performed very well for us. But an incredible bird to get in the province. Obviously, one of the other big things that one has to do is pelagic trips. I know many people struggle with going to sea, but it is an important thing to try and boost some numbers. That's the boat that we run out on, and the idea is obviously that we take people out to the trawling grounds to get in behind the trawlers and to have these thousands of birds literally in your face at arm's length. Last year, I managed to do 19 pelagic trips. I was scheduled to do more, but obviously the weather always fools around and doesn't let us get out all the time. So I lost, I can't remember, maybe 7 or 10 trips because of weather. But the 19 trips still gave a reasonable cross-section of what was available. So for those of you that have done pelagic trips before, you'll know that there's certain species that you can see throughout the year. Things like black-browed albatross, white-chinned petrel, Suchi shearwater, and one of the smallest birds that we get out there, the Wilson storm petrel. But it's not, you can't just do a pelagic trip once and think you're going to get all the birds, because like on land, the birds are seasonal. So in the summertime, we get things like Corrie shearwaters and Manx shearwaters and European storm petrels, Pomerine Jaegers or skuas, and Sabine's gulls coming through here. And they're here from probably mid to late October through to early April before they leave and head north again. And once they're gone, they are replaced with the winter migrants, which include things like pintado or Cape petrel, and Antarctic prion. And these birds are only here, in fact, Antarctic prion is here for the shortest period. It probably arrives in late May, and by the end of July, it's gone again. So it's a very short window to get it. And some birds are only what we call passage migrants. So they move through in either autumn or spring. Things like great shearwater and soft plumage petrel and black-bellied storm petrel. So one needs to do as many trips as possible and across a wide variety of times to get a decent cross-section of all the possible birds that you can get out there. Naturally, you're also hoping for a few odd birds along the way, and we had some nice ones last year. Spectacled petrel, it's always a very sought-after bird. Flesh-footed shearwater, which is very rare in the Western Cape. Northern royal albatross, and in fact we saw southern royals as well. And one of the birds of the year, this was a Tristan albatross that we had last year, a really friendly bird that hung around for quite some time. Yes, so twitching, that makes a big part of a big year, because you can get all the residents, you can get all the migrants, but if you really want to boost your numbers, you've got to go and try and see as many of the rare and out of range birds as possible as well. And we were lucky to have quite a few of those during the year. Now, for starters, we look at the regional rarities. So don't laugh with this next slide. It's a dark-capped bulbul, and I'm sure 75% of the people listening to this talk are thinking, what on earth is Trevor talking about? That bird is the commonest thing in my garden. Well, dark-capped bulbul is almost unheard of in the Western Cape, and I had to go to Mossel Bay to see it. So it was a very, very big one to get for the Western Cape big year. We have the other two species of bulbul, capes and African red-eyed are common, but dark-capped is almost unknown from the province. Equally, crested barbet, which I know is a garden bird for many of you, is a mega rarity in the Western Cape. And we had to travel all the way to Maritzburg to go and see the crested barbet that was there. A ground scraper thrush. This was seen on a trip to Knysna. A Bailon's crake. And we had a black tern that turned up at Ritvlei in Cape Town. Fortunately, not too far from where I live. Yellow-billed stork. It's also a regional rarity. Pink-back pelican. Brown snake eagle. This was a common cuckoo that was in Constantia last year, a juvenile common cuckoo that spent a couple of weeks there. Lesser grey shrike, and blue-cheeked bee-eaters, and perhaps one of the most bizarre regional rarities we had last year was a lilac-breasted roller out towards Nelspruit. So Nelspruit is, if you know the Western Cape, it's kind of between Beaufort West and Maritzburg, literally in the middle of nowhere. There were also a number of national rarities. This is a red phalarope. This photo was actually taken this year, not last year, but we had several red phalaropes last year. Broad-billed sandpiper at Gilbeck in the West Coast National Park. European or Eurasian oyster catcher. This one was, the bird was at Plettenberg Bay on the Keerbooms River estuary. And then we had the snowy sheathbill that turned up and spent some time moving around between Cork Bay and Simonstown harbours, and then also went across to Seal Island in False Bay. It's been numerous years since one of these have been in the Western Cape. And so I was very, very happy to have this one turn up during my big year. Fortunately, I got it on the first afternoon that it was reported. But some people had to actually charter boats and go out to Seal Island to see this bird. And it was quite an experience for them. In fact, they would pull up next to the island and the bird would fly from the island and come and land on the boat. And you saw all these birders with their big lenses having to take their cell phones out to photograph the sheathbill because it was too close. Another great bird we've been lucky to have in the last few years, in fact, is Baird sandpiper. This bird was at Macassar Sewage Works. Michael Mason and I spent one lovely late afternoon there in beautiful light photographing this bird. We're very chuffed to get nice shots of it. We had a gull-bill tern that turned up at Kliphoek Salt Pans in Veltrup. Spent a little while there. And then this grey wagtail found itself along a little mountain stream near De Rist, which is near Oudtshoorn. So in the middle of the little karoo. So I had to do a long drive out to go and find this bird. Fortunately, I did. And then some of the real big ones that we had last year, the red-rumped swallow, and perhaps the biggest bird that we had last year was the laughing gull at Mossel Bay, which took a liking to the slap chips that were getting fed to it. It hung around a little restaurant at the harbour, and it, just like all the other local gulls, was enjoying the slap chips. And we thought it was there to stay forever. But for some unknown reason, it decided to move off. This was a new bird for Southern Africa at the time. Still the only record we have. But the big year wasn't just about the ticks. There was more to it than that. I got to spend a lot of time birding with friends because I was in the field so often. It was great to spend time with other people. I didn't have to spend all of it on my own. So it was lovely to be able to share a lot of the time with other people. I was there and I had friends joining me on trips to the extremities of the province where they reached certain milestones. On the left, Michael Mason, just after he got his 500th bird in the Western Cape, which was a garden warbler in Murraysburg, out in the Karoo. And on the right is Sarita Dawes. You heard Mike mention earlier Cliff Dawes, so Sarita's Cliff's wife. Sarita got her 500th bird when we were in Knysna. It was a little sparrowhawk. And for those of you that are from the Western Cape and do keep a provincial list, you will know that reaching 500 species in the province is a fairly significant achievement. So they did extremely well to do that. And it was great to be there for both of them when they reached that milestone. I got to visit some wonderfully natural places. This was the hangout of a vagrant marabou stork near a little town called Op die Berg, which is, I suppose, the closest town that most people might know is Ceres. So, and this marabou stork had turned up at this dump site and spent some time there. And we got to see some amazing things. This is one of the highest spring tides I have ever seen at Geelbeck in my entire life. And I've been birding that area for 4 decades. You couldn't actually get to the bird hide. This is the boardwalk to the bird hide. And as you got a little bit further along, the boardwalk was actually underwater. It was so high. It's as high, as I said, it's as high as I've ever seen it. And naturally, there were no waders to be seen anywhere. Most of the high tide roosts were underwater. So it was just an incredible thing to experience. There were some fantastic twitches. This is the red-rumped swallow out near Atlantis that was found towards the end of last year. And we had some sticky situations that we had to get out of as well. My good friend Garrett skied managed to drive us into some rather slippery mud, and we were going nowhere. In fact, I shouldn't say we were going nowhere. We weren't going forward, we were going sideways and slipping down in towards the salt pan. So it took a lot of extraction to get the car out. As you can see, Garrett was in the firing line as we were getting the car out, but it all made for good fun. So where did it all end up? I ended the year with my last bird being an elegant tern on the 17th of December, which was number 443 for the year. So a fairly decent improvement on what the previous record was at 412. So I bettered that by 31 species. And this is just a sort of chart to show what my monthly progress was. I suppose, as with any big year within a relatively small area, it starts off at a very, very steep incline, and then it just levels out, and the progress is a lot slower than what you would like. But at least it is a constant upward trend and not completely flatlining. And to give you an idea of the coverage that I did in the province, so this is all thanks to Henk and the team at BirdLife that have given us this wonderful app, and we can keep track of what we're doing. But you can see that I in the north, I went up to as far north as you can go in the province, to a little town called Kliprunt, which is the northernmost town in the Western Cape. I'm not even sure I'd call it a town. It's like a little hamlet. And then right in the northeast, around Murraysburg, I spent a lot of time there. And then also in the far east on the garden route, I spent a lot of time there. And then you can see my spread of pelagic trips, where I was south of Cape Point, all the way through to sort of almost in like due west of Table Bay at one point. So I covered as much of the province as I could. Naturally, I would have liked to have done more, but I do try and hold down a normal daytime job as well, as much as most people don't believe that. But something's got to pay for me to actually be able to do this sort of stuff. So what did I miss during the year? There were a number of species, some of them that I actually did try and twitch, but didn't get. There was Caspian plovers at the Mont Nature Reserve, red-tailed tropic bird that irritated me no end by being seen, and then I would rush off to try and see it, and it would just be gone, and then I'd go back home and somebody would report it again, and I'd rush out again. But I never laid eyes on it during last year. There was a white-backed vulture that was seen cruising around the northern suburbs of Cape Town, tawny eagle outside Beaufort West. There was a grey-headed kingfisher that was seen in the West Coast National Park, African pygmy kingfisher that was seen in the Garden Route Botanical Gardens in George, Temmings coursers and crowned hornbills. So a number of potential species that I could have seen that did turn up in the province, but I just didn't get them. But you can't catch them all. And I suppose that's just one thing you've got to learn to accept. You've got to try and do as best as you can and see what you can get out of it and just have fun along the way. Ladies and gents, hopefully I haven't bored you too much. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Trevor. That was a great overview of your epic year. You certainly covered a lot of ground and smashed the previous record. That was, yeah, must have been a great feeling when you passed that milestone quite early on in the year, it looked like.
Yes, it was earlier than I expected. Yeah. Yeah,
and you certainly got some great birds there and have given people a good overview of where they can go in the Western Cape to see some of these special birds. So thank you very much for taking the time to put that presentation together. Just quickly before we move on to some questions, just to remind everyone, we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. So the 4th of April, where Vikash Tataya is from the Mauritius Bird, is going to talk about Mauritius bird conservation. So that promises to be very interesting. So please do join us again. So on to some questions. There aren't that many that have come through so far. So please do, if you have a question for Trevor, please do pop it into the Q&A box or the chat feed. So the first question from Janet Bloom, asking how far out to sea you extended your Western Cape boundary. Did you use the EEZ or was it something different?
Well, yeah, in theory, you would use the 200 nautical mile economic exclusivity zone. But, you know, on a one-day pelagic trip, you don't get anywhere near that. At max, you would be 40 nautical miles offshore.
Okay. Bill Ted complimented you on your photos. So yeah, great quality photos, and asking whether all the ones that you used in this presentation were from your big year.
No, they're all my photos, but they're not all from the big year. No, okay. No. And with, you know, the problem is that you spend a lot of time running around trying to get all the birds. I did photograph a lot of species last year, but a lot of them were record shots, just to show that I'd seen the bird. But I rather used better shots that I had of the particular species in the talk.
Yeah.
I've photographed, I think, around 420 of the 443 species that I saw last year.
Okay. Yeah, that links to a question from Eleanor Peak, asking whether you had to photograph every bird that you saw that year, but I guess not.
No, look, there's no, I suppose you can set your own rules. In terms of a big year, there is no specific rule that you've got to photograph every single species. There are times where I didn't get a photo, but I was with other people and they may have got photos of the bird or things like that. I spent very little time birding on my own last year, so I did have witnesses for probably 99% of the birds that I saw.
Okay, that's great. So a lot of people, Arno, who else? Michelle Klopper, Eleanor Whitecross, asking how many kilometers you traveled. Did you keep track of that?
I didn't. I didn't, because it'll probably scare me. No, I've got no idea how many kilometers I traveled, and probably the scarier part of that would be how much was spent on fuel. But yeah, I didn't keep track of that, unfortunately.
Okay. And then another question that a couple of people are asking, Aidan, and again, or might be Helen or Rob, asking what kind of photographic equipment you're using.
At the moment, okay, so first of all, I'm a Canon person. At the moment, I'm using a mirrorless system, the Canon R7 with a 100 to 500 mil RF lens. I've come from having the big lenses, the 500 f4s, etc., and the mirrorless has made a big difference in my life with the light cameras and light lenses, so I don't need to lug those massive pieces of equipment around with me anymore, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think the quality of the images is fantastic with what you can get with these lightweight kits now.
Yeah, it is. It is incredible. And then also another question, a couple of people are asking, Michael Potts, Jonathan Hemp, Andrew Marshall asking about whether you recorded the birds on just the call or whether you had to see it.
I think I saw everything last year. I mean, you are allowed to record on call, but I think I ended up seeing everything last year anyway. There's very few birds that, I suppose maybe one or two of the fluff tails that you would, obviously, you don't want to disturb them and call them out or anything like that. But most of the things I think I saw. I don't think there was anything that was recorded on call alone.
Okay, that's quite impressive. What else is there? MC Bota asks, what is your day job?
I'm an architect. I draw pictures. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I it was about Garrett, but it can equally apply to you on the Cape Town Big Year group, where someone said, "Oh, I wondered if you had a day job." And I think many people could say the same for
yes.
you.
Yeah.
As you say, it's a tool to go birding.
Yes, indeed.
So SS de Villiers is asking about night birds. What good night birds did you come across? Did you go out birding at night or?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to. I mean, there's
absolutely.
There's nightjars, and so I mean, obviously, fiery necked, rufous cheeked, freckled. Those were all done at night. Owls wise, I mean, then a lot of the owls I saw just during the day, things like spotted eagle owl and barn owl, you bump into them. I think Cape eagle owl, we did at dusk in Murraysburg. Wood owl was during the day. Marsh owl I did at night. I think that's it. The spotted, barn, wood, and Vero's eagle owl, I got all of those during the day. But yeah, I definitely went out at night for some birds.
Yeah, well, I have yet to add the Cape eagle owl to my life list, so I might be contacting you for some. I've heard it in the mountains, hiking in Peterberg, but I've never actually seen it. So I might.
Yeah, it's a tough bird to get, and you know, unfortunately, everybody thinks that because it's called a Cape eagle owl, you come to Cape Town and it's easy. Yes. Yeah, but yeah, as you know, it isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ray Lazarus was asking about night herons and bitterns. Where would you recommend to go to see those sorts of species?
Well, I mean, black crown night heron is a fairly common bird, so you can bump into that at a number of wetlands just around Cape Town. And as much as it's called a night heron, you can often get them in the sort of early morning and late afternoon, being active or even just roosting during the middle of the day. White-backed night heron is a much tougher bird in the province. I got that at Sedgefield. There's a little retirement village on the edge of Sedgefield that has a dam on the edge of the retirement village, and there's a white-backed night heron that hangs around in that dam and has been for probably about a year or a year and a half now. And they are also in a couple of other places on the garden route. They're on the Keerboems River in Plet. They're on the the Groot River in Nature's Valley. So they are possible to get there. In terms of bitterns, well, we only really have one option in the Western Cape, and that's little bittern. And again, if you're in Cape Town, I suppose one of the best places for little bittern is in Taka Island, where they're fairly reliably seen.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks Thanks for that information. Then Josh is asking, when you went to the northernmost hamlet of the Western Cape, what birds were you looking for in particular there?
So there's a small population is a strong word, but there's a few Cape glossy starlings that just get into the province right in the north. So that was one of the big targets. It is an area where I've also seen orange river white-eyed before, but I didn't get them last year, despite trying. But I was very lucky to also find a Stark's lark when I was right up in the north, and that's an incredibly rare bird for the Western Cape. I think it's only the second record.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, you must have added quite a few, well, as you know, collecting data on the distribution of the birds.
Yeah, look, I did a lot of atlasing as well.
That's great.
Yeah, full protocol cards and eBird checklists. So yeah, they were all submitted. I can't remember exactly how many, but yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, that's great to also contribute to science, to citizen science with your birding.
Yes.
So thank you very much for doing that as well. Those data are very, very useful to conservation and research in science. So yeah, thank you very much. I think we've gone through all of the questions. Apologies if I've missed anyone. There's a flood of compliments for you in the chat box, Trevor. I'll send that on so you can read them at your leisure. That was a great presentation. So thank you very much again for joining us. And thank you to all the viewers for tuning in. It was nice to have a load shedding free evening.
Yes.
I don't know if you have any last words you'd like to say, Trevor, before we end off.
No, just yeah, thank you for everybody that tuned in and made it through the talk. And yeah, hopefully it's showcased what is available in the Western Cape in terms of birds and birding. It really is a lovely place to be based and to spend time birding.
Absolutely. It is a very special province and with special birds. So thank you very much for showcasing them and for all you do for the birding community. It's great to get the rare bird alerts so we can all rush off and go and twitch them. So thank you very much. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, and thanks to all our viewers. Please do join us again in 2 weeks' time for the next Conservation Conversations. Good night.
Right. Thank you.